Hi, everybody. Welcome to Virtual MOCA. My name is Mia Locks. I'm Senior Curator at MOCA, and I am very delighted to welcome you to today's program, Writing Diaspora, an Evening of Poetry with Raquel Gutiérrez and Javier Zamora, moderated by Yansi Pérez. This event is organized by In Plain Sight, which is a coalition of 80 artists led by Castles and Rafa Esparza, united to create an artwork dedicated to the abolition of immigrant detention and the United States culture of incarceration. Today's event is made possible by MOCA membership, so a really big thank you to our members for your support. If you're interested in seeing more programs like this, I hope you'll support us and become a member. Our memberships start at just $30 a year for people under 30. You can visit moca.org for more info. I'd now like to introduce Kyle Stephan from In Plain Sight, who will introduce the rest of our panelists. Kyle is a Los Angeles-based historian of modern and contemporary art from Latin America and the United States. She organized The Matter of Photography in the Americas, an exhibition of conceptual photography from Latin America at the Cantor Center for Visual Art at Stanford University. She was also the Andrew W. Mellon Curatorial Fellow at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And as an independent curator, she has organized exhibitions, performances, and live multimedia events for international cultural organizations, including the Sao Paulo Museum of Modern Art, Bank of Brazil Cultural Centers, ZKM, Red Cat Theater, SF Camera Work, and the British Film Institute, where she was curator of film and multimedia art from 2005 to 2010. So with that, I'll say thank you all for joining us once again, and take it away, Kyle.
Great, thank you so much, Mia. And thank you so much to MOCA for coming on board quite early in our In Plain Sight development process to fund the artistic action that we're holding, and for hosting these cultural programs that allow us to delve deeper into the issues around immigrant detention. I'd like to acknowledge some of the other people who helped to make this program possible. First, I'd like to thank Rafa Esparza and Castles, our intrepid leaders who put the project together, as well as my co-curator of public programs, Paulina Lara. I'd also like to thank our designer, Charles Hickey, our social impact team, Rebecca Lechtenfeld and Set Hernandez Ronquillo, and of course, our illustrious guest tonight, Raquel Gutiérrez. In Plain Sight is dedicated to amplifying the work of our organizational partners who are tirelessly fighting for immigrant justice every day. As a team, we'd like to acknowledge their commitment to those inside and their decades of service fighting for immigrant justice. Their diligent work and their care for our communities is our inspiration for the project, and we hope that this program will inspire you, our audiences, to find out more about them after the program. Finally, given our discussion of Central American immigrant experiences this evening, I would especially like to acknowledge the many local Central American community organizations that are In Plain Sight partners. The Salvadoran American Leadership and Educational Fund, Clinica Romero, El Rescate, Carecen LA, the National Day Labor Organizing Network, Central American Research and Policy Institute, and Maya Vision. And before I introduce our guest, I'd like to introduce a little bit about the project for those who might not be as familiar with In Plain Sight. In Plain Sight is a collaboration of 80 artists, activists, and organizers co-founded by Castles and Rafa Esparza, united to create an innovative and poetic artwork dedicated to the abolition of immigrant detention and the US culture of incarceration. Over Independence Day weekend this past July, IPS launched the nation's sky typing fleets to spell out artist-generated messages in water vapor, legible for miles. These messages were typed in the sky over detention facilities, immigration courts, borders, and other sites of historic relevance across the nation, from New York to El Paso to Los Angeles. As the plane soared, they made visible in the sky what is too often unseen and unspoken on the ground: the appalling, profoundly immoral imprisonment of immigrants. IPS broke through this wall of secrecy, using art as public engagement to expose sites for detention centers, often hiding in plain sight from local. While planes were in the air, on-the-ground activations galvanized activist groups gathered near detention centers. At some facilities, detained immigrants were able to see the sky-typed writing, encouraging chants of the phrases in solidarity and providing a form of support to organizing efforts inside against the difficult and often deadly circumstances of COVID. Each sky-type phrase was followed by a hashtag, XMAP, which led viewers to an interactive website where they could locate facilities in their vicinity and take action to abolish ICE. In its social engagement efforts, In Plain Sight is distinguished from its many artist projects by its close work with social impact teams and its priority of following the lead of community and movement partners and amplifying their campaigns. For many of these organizations, this was also the first time that they had engaged artists in their work. In Plain Sight was not a one-time artist intervention. We continue to build relationships with our partner organizations and grow our social impact campaign that includes additional flight paths in New York, Los Angeles, and the southeastern US before the presidential election, a robust interactive website, which you see here, plans for an 8-part documentary series directed by filmmaker PJ Raval, accessible actions that the public can take to join the movement against immigrant detention, and cultural partnerships producing arts-related education and engagement. The 80 artists who participated in IPS represented a range of ages and reflect established and emerging voices across various disciplines. They are artists whose family and community members have been detained, undocumented artists, indigenous artists, artists descended from those who survived Japanese American incarceration camps, the Holocaust, or the AIDS crisis, artists who are active in the movement for Black lives. In solidarity, these artists have come together to focus their attention on immigrant detention. We are thrilled that Javier Zamora and Raquel Gutiérrez, 2 of the artists involved in the July 4th intervention, join us tonight. These acclaimed poets typed their words in the sky, and tonight they will share selections of their poetry that speaks to issues of immigration and borderland politics. Our first reader tonight is Javier Zamora, an award-winning Salvadoran American poet and activist. His father fled El Salvador when he was only 1-year-old, and his mother when he was about to turn 5. Both parents' migrations were caused by the US-funded Salvadoran Civil War between 1979 and 1992. In 1999, Javier immigrated through Guatemala, Mexico, and eventually the Sonoran Desert. After a coyote abandoned his group in Oaxaca, he managed to make it to Arizona with the aid of other migrants. His first full-length collection, Unaccompanied, on Copper Canyon Press, explores how immigration and the Civil War have impacted his life. A 2018-2019 Radcliffe Fellow at Harvard University, he also holds fellowships from Canto Mundo, Colgate University, McDowell, Macondo, National Endowment for the Arts, Poetry Foundation, Stanford University, and Yaddo. He lives in Harlem, New York, where he is working on a memoir and his second collections of poems, which address the current immigration crisis. Over July 4th, Javier's phrase, "Enemo, enemo," appeared over the US Border Patrol Central Processing Center and Ursula Detention Center in McAllen, Texas. Our second reader tonight and poetry. An adult child of Mexican and Salvadoran immigrants, Raquel was born and raised in Los Angeles and currently resides in Tucson, Arizona, where she just completed 2 MFAs in poetry and nonfiction from the University of Arizona. She is a 2017 recipient of the Creative Capital Andy Warhol Foundation Arts Writer Grant, and also runs the small press Econotextual Objects, which publishes intimate works by queer and transgender poets of color. Her phrase, "Nos vemos libres," appears over the ICE field office in downtown Phoenix, also the site of a car caravan demonstration organized by Puente Human Rights Movement the same day. After Javier and Raquel read, they will be joined for a conversation moderated by Yansi Pérez. Pérez was born in El Salvador and moved to the United States in 1982. She holds an AB in comparative literature from Stanford University and an MA and PhD from Princeton University. She is an associate professor of Spanish and Latin American studies at College in Minnesota. And she has published about Central American authors such as Roque Dalton, Horacio Castellanos Moya, Claudia Hernandez, among others. Her book, Más allá del duelo, Otras formas de imaginar, sentir y pensar la memoria en Centroamérica, was published in 2019. Currently, she is working on a project entitled A Cartography of Material Memory in the Central American Diaspora in Los Angeles. Please join me in welcoming our guest, and I'll invite Javier to begin reading.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here tonight, and it's a great honor to read with these Salvi legends, and I'll just go ahead and read 3 poems for you. And I'll start with, they're all new, and I'll start with this one, and it's about my first time going back to the border and trying to touch the wall in front of it. The rusted metal slats don't reflect my brown face. I can fit my hands through, but nothing else. I've been here, this very plot of land someone in the Border Patrol helped me refine. This is probably where, Agent Cantu said. If there were 2 cities you could see at night, this is the only place. That's Agua Prieta, that's Naco. I'm back at night looking up at the sky. My eyes readjust, the moon, the only light allowed. We can come back at dawn if you want. I don't want. I know this is where just one of my memories was lived. I can finally legally walk up to it, touch it, even cross to the other side. Research is what I tell the Mexican border guard when we stop in Naco to get my passport stamped. It's September 10th, 2019. 20 years ago, the lights I have never forgot. Yesterday, an announcement. The reason a teenager with a backpack is being told he cannot ask here. They will not accept him. The Mexican guard, an ex-Border Patrol agent, Cantu, and I watch another Mexican guard tell the teenager this. I want to help. I want to at least give him something, but I don't. I stay inside the tinted glass through which the kid cannot look through. Someone from the Grupo Beta has been called, and now he's explaining to the teenager there is no shelter here. The closest ones, Agua Prieta, Hermosillo, or Nogales. Nothing? Nothing. I can't stay here? You can't. Do you need a ride? We can give you a ride. Choose a location, the Grupo Beta says. A la gran puta, dije que no iba a chillar. Estoy aquí, estoy allá. It does not matter. It doesn't matter. Agent Cantu needs his car permit printed. We have to wait. We watch the kid walk into Grupo Beta's truck. He is alone. I was parentless, but not alone. No one is ever really alone, I thought, used to think before seeing this kid. There were more this morning. Look, almost 257 just today, all kids, the Mexican guard says. The printer is almost ready to print. It takes long. Look, we will keep a paper record. The Mexican shows me his notes in blue ink. He types into the computer with his indexes. The kid is gone. The permit is printed. Where are you headed to? The Mexican asks. Down, Cantu says, to Aconchi. It's my first time back in Sonora. I want to find out what route I took from Hermosillo to here. I need to know. I don't know why, but I do, because I couldn't be here for so long, because I couldn't stand here, breathe here, without anyone telling me I must find a shelter tonight, because for so long since I have to watch over my shoulder for uniforms, always ready to outrun, outjump, slide under wires, hide in the brush, because some of the people with me, I never knew if they made it out or if they're still here on the dirt underground. And it's perhaps why I've never had the urge to touch the wall, to draw on it, to paint it. I couldn't even bring myself to protest it. I was not here more than 20 years ago when all of this happened. It has been everywhere. That's a new one. And now I'll shift gears and still talk about the wall that apparently, I forget his name, ripped off a lot of people trying to send him money, and now he's in jail. So this is about a wall, but I remixed it with a merengue legend. If you know, in the 90s, all over Central America and the Caribbean, Quinito Mendez was king. And so this is a remix of Quinito Mendez's Cachamba. So it's in that rhythm. And it's called There's a Wall, featuring merengue legend Quinito Mendez's Cachamba. There's a wall, there's a wall. There's a wall where people are tanning Speedos, bikinis inside of a hammock on top of the wall near the Mexican desert. There's an agent, there's an agent, there's an agent. She connects, running toward the people with Speedos, bikinis inside of a hammock on top of the wall at the edge of the Mexican desert. There's a deputy, there's a deputy, there's a deputy who ordered the agent arrest the people in Speedos, bikinis inside of a hammock on top of the wall at the edge of the river in the Mexican desert. A commissioner who said no, secretary who said yes to the deputy who ordered the agents running at the people tanning Speedos, bikinis inside of a hammock on top of the wall at the edge of a river in the Mexican desert. There's a secretary who told commissioner, I'm in charge. Commissioner who told deputy, no, who told agent, arrest the people tanning in Speedos, bikinis inside of a hammock on top of the wall at the edge of a river in the Mexican desert. The president, the president who said, you're fired. To the secretary who said, I'm in charge. Commissioner who told the deputy, no, who sent agents running toward the tanners in Speedos, bikinis inside of a hammock on top of the wall at the edge of a river in the Mexican desert. And the wall is me. Yes, it's me. I'm wearing a Speedo. Yes, he is. Inside a bikini. Yes, he is. I'm not Mexican. No, he's not. Let me tan, please. Let him be. Please let me breathe. Let him live. Fuck the BP. Just fuck them, please. Así, mamacita, así, mamacita, así, y ya. And that's different. And it's fun to read. Usually it's a lot of sadness regarding the southern border and immigration in general. So I'm trying to change shit up. And now I'll end with this one. For a lot of immigrants who immigrate here, especially children, and I can speak to that because coming here was very difficult for me. Usually you come here, you try to adapt, and then you try to assimilate and forget where you come from. I was one of those children who pretended not to even speak Spanish, even though I came here when I was 9. And then on the flip side, once you're like, get woke or whatever, what ends up happening in college is how a lot of these immigrants, myself included, really cling into the nationalism of what being Salvadoran means. And that's also a problem. And I see it happen in a lot of Central American studies. As a Salvadoran, I always critique the Chicano studies because it's very Mexican centric, and Latino studies very Mexican centric, but Central American studies also has that potential becoming very Salvadoran centric. And so this is just a poem trying to address that. And all you need to know is that Los Hermanos Flores are a cumbia band from El Salvador. And thank you for listening. And yeah, and this one, the title is No, Actually, Soy Salvadoreño, or how nationalism is still not the answer. El Salvadorian, los muy muys. We don't even know what to call ourselves. How to eat a pupusa, fork and knife, or open it up and treat it like a taco. But then we're betraying our nationalistic, read, anti-Black, anti-Indigenous impulse to not mix with everyone else. And what's with jalapenos in the curtido, chipotes, with using spicy salsa instead of salsa de tomate? There's too many restaurantes. One side of the menu, Mexican, the other, platos típicos. Typically, I want to order the ensalada, but then they bring me an actual salad. I say, coman miércoles. They want to charge me extra for harina de arroz, extra for los nuegados. There's nowhere I would rather be most than in Abuelita's kitchen, watching her throw bay leaves, tomatoes, garlic, oregano into the blender, then chicharrón, helping herself to everyone that knows she made the best pupusas from 1985 to 2004. By then, Salvadoreños became hermanos lejanos. We traded Colón for Washington. By then, los hermanos Flores looked for new singers every time they returned from Los United to San Salvador. Stay, no se vayan. Stay, no sean dundos, was all those Salvadoreños could say. We didn't listen and came here only to be called Mexican or Puerto Rican, depending on the coast. We had to fight for a better horchata, not the lazy, whiter one with only rice. And when we didn't want to fight, we tried to blend, speak more Mexican, more ira, more popote, more no pos wow. No, majes, no se me hagan dundos, pónganse trucha, vos. When anyone wants to call you Mexican, you can just say, no, actually, andate a la M, hijo de puya, racista, cara de nacionalista. Gracias.
Wonderful. That was increíble, Javier. El chero mero mero. All right. Bueno, voy a empezar aquí con la memoria. Well, first of all, I'm here in Arizona, and it's really wonderful to just be in this space that I feel Los Angeles, much in the heart. All the, all the partner organizations are very much part of my revolutionary education. When I was an undergrad at Cal State Northridge, I got scholarships from SALEF. I interned at Clínica Romero. I worked with a gay Guatemalteco cultural organizer named Roland Valencia, who taught me a lot about just, how to be of service. And this piece that I'm about to read, this is very new because I've been thinking about proximities and distances to the diaspora and to all things Salvadoreño. And I just happen to have this pile of old journals, and this is a journal I took to El Salvador on a trip sponsored by Carecen that Leda Ramos organized, and had us, 5 of us, the writers that would end up being anthologized in Isla de Voz, the Los Angeles writers. We went to San Salvador and participated in, a series of cultural intercambios with activists, artists, writers, scholars, and organizers in San Salvador. And just want to show you how old this is. It has a looper sticker and a plankton man. Back then in 2000, when we were into Nortec, and I was 23 years old. And so this is a journal on a trip through Perkin and making our way down to El Mozote. And this is just 23-year-old me completely, traveling to Salvador by myself for the first time as an adult with other, other curious 1.5 second gen young adult children of Salvis, and who are kind of at a loss, right, for a sense of belonging in a Southern context and historical belonging. So so I'm going to read this, and it'll give you a sense of just I don't know. For me, I'm just like, whoa, this is a really interesting moment in my thinking through proximities and distances. So this is the evening of February 13th, 2000. Okay, I'm no longer in the car. It's now almost 11 p.m. on 2/13/2000, our second night in El Salvador. After we arrived to San Salvador, we went to Morazan, a 4-hour drive from San Salvador. This rad kid, Edgar, who was 25, we found out, he looks at least 10 years older, drove us around. We came to Perkin, where the Museo del FMLN is, and it was really cool. It's atop these amazing hills, and it had a lot of great relics of the movement. I'm hesitant to call it the time of the Civil War, just because it has a negative connotation for me. I got some great posters, a book, and goofy keychains to give to friends with the FMLN logo on it. It's funny, but for me, the logo represents that gone era. I know it doesn't really mean the same thing anymore. It's so middle left now. I'd still buy the shirt though. I'm really glad that the drive was nice and safe. I really didn't feel that threatened at all. I mean, I had thoughts of bad things running in my head, but I knew that realistically it wasn't going to be murders, rapes, beheadings going on. I swear I take some of this stuff a little too seriously sometimes. Not that I was going to start trusting more easily, but I think I might have taken some stuff a little too seriously. We stayed in an amazing hotel atop of the hill just outside of Perkin. It was this woodsy feeling hotel cabañas actually that were really cheap. $27 is not cheap in 2000. But it got us 2 rooms with 2 bathrooms. There were these big beds and hot water and glossy wood paneling. It was really bougie in a Salvi way, but it was really cheap. The food in the restaurant was good and didn't make me sick. I couldn't help but think that Edgar was going to kill us though. There I go again with the morbid thoughts. Why am I so Salvi? After we had breakfast on Sunday, we gathered all of our belongings and headed for El Mozote. It was a pretty gnarly road, just as bad as I remembered from the last time I went to El Sauce with my family. There were pretty sharp rocks, and 3 out of the 6 of us were riding in the back of the pickup. We headed down La Calle Negra, which is the good paved road into Arambala, and then finally reaching El Mozote. There we came to the memorial silhouette of a family, representing all of the families who had died during the awful massacre in 1981. All the names were listed on the memorial's wall. We met 4 boys there, aged 9 and 10. They were Luis, Miguel, Chico, and I forget. And they knew a lot of the history that had gone down there. One of the boys' mothers had lost her siblings and other relatives, and one of the boys said his father was saved by somebody that could have been a soldier. I'm not too sure, and may need to ask Marlon or Lita about those details. I was reading The Massacre at El Mozote by Mark Danner, and read about the small boy who got away from a group of soldiers after he was lost. That was the last of 3 children to be killed. He saw them hang his brother and thought he was better off running and getting killed than just waiting. Luckily, he got away. This sounds vaguely familiar to the boy Chico told us about. Luis actually showed us a bullet, and all the boys showed us the dumping site behind the church. The boys all have the same last names of those who perished in the massacre. These boys are all descendants to those who were there almost 20 years ago. It didn't feel that spooky being there. I wonder if hanging out with those kids made it less tense. I think so. So just, that was the last time I had been to El Salvador, and in some ways, the 2001, the earthquake, my mom's sister, 2 years older than her closest sister, and a family of siblings of 10 who lived, of 12 that my grandmother had. Mi tía Ede and mi tío Samuel, died in a landslide at Las Colinas in Santa Tecla. So 2000 was the last time I was there, just because our family in the States were just like, absorbed by grief. So, so it's, these moments where of getting to think about and think through memory and family and ancestry and history, of course, that all of this comes up, and all the intersections around, how my identity was shaped more outside of my own family, just because we didn't really, my mom didn't really get too deep into things, and Los Angeles, is just one of those places where we have such a high, concentration, the biggest population of Salvadorans outside of the country, on the West Coast at least. So that was very much, that shaped my sense of self around that, in this very, like, a phrase that Marlon Morales would use, la memoria ajena. So let me get into a piece. It's called, as part of that revolutionary education, I'm going to read this piece called Don White Presente. And Don White was one of the co-founders of CISPIS, the Coalition of Solidarity for the People of El Salvador, which I think people of a certain generation arrived to what was happening in the U.S. intervention in El Salvador through the activist work. And a lot of that work, taking place on college campuses, right? So, there's, just that there was a CISPIS, in Madison, Wisconsin, to me, blows my mind. And so Don White was also, I'm going to read this I'm going to actually share my screen, only the sound, because I do want to play a Silvio Rodriguez song. So, Don, so a little bit that I'll share, it's a complicated homage to Don White, one of the co-founders of CISPIS. When I first met him in 1998, there was an ebullience about him, an elfin charm that endeared him to working class Salvi exiles and organizers in the 90s. And I didn't know him too well, but he did help raise funds for this revolutionary group tour, a youth group to Havana, organized by another wonderful, man of that generation, John Hilson, who was a Jewish communist who worked at the airport. He was a union guy, and he ran the Los Angeles Coalition in solidarity with Cuba. And it was, Don White just had these like fiery speeches to like raise money. And it was just a group of us, like, 19 to 24-year-olds, know-nothings, basically, getting our asses handed to us and getting sent to Havana. And it was a chance for me to see, Fidel Castro speak for 6 hours, just like, like watching the Beatles. And I would see Don White, at Luna y Sol, this anarchist cafe in MacArthur Park, or at Bus Riders Union meetings. And, he was very, to me, like, it wasn't a very queer space, these like movement spaces, but Don was like very effeminate and had a very high-pitched voice, and never had a partner, and just kind of just fueled all of his energy, I think, that one would have into a movement. And man, like, people just really loved him. So he was just critical of U.S. imperialism. And before he died, just BDS, Palestinian support. He was just hated the U.S. government. So when I think about being Salvi, I think of him. And let me play this one.
Hay otros que luchan un año y son mejores. Hay quienes luchan muchos años y son muy buenos.
Hay hombres que luchan un día y son buenos.
Esos son los imprescindibles.
Hay otros que luchan un año y son mejores. Hay quienes luchan muchos años y son muy buenos. Pero hay los que luchan toda la vida y esos son los imprescindibles. And that's Bertolt Brecht for Don White. What is it about the movement that helps dispel the loneliness of the closet? How did he do it as a school teacher in an ever-embattled school district as is the one in Los Angeles? Who was he who brought his love, his hope, and his dreams for a liberated world into the classroom, into the meeting space, into the streets, into the protests, into the strategy sessions? Was he involved in more of the dangerous activities? The adrenaline spiking in the early hours of dawn? Behind the scenes? Did he know the arms runners? Did he know who killed Roque? The more intensely proximate to violence type of company arrows? How did he find love? Where did he find love? Was he out cruising the boulevards looking for comfort in the arms of brown men? Did the people he loved so much know about his proclivities? Is it fair to speculate? He struggled for our people every day and he was good. Is it wrong to assign him a site of desire even when desire is fueled what fueled his desire, when politics fueled a desire for a just world, a world he could belong to sitting behind us where we could enjoy the view of the world at the expense of his sightline? Is there a way he put his desire into the movement? He was an effeminate singular gender that had no name. When acts were designated by churches, there was no time to free our bodies when Reagan was bombing the soul out of Perkin, Chalate, but he, the indispensable one, he carried himself as fully himself. He had the most terrible toupee of vanity in need of a lift. He had no vanity. That is how good he was. Or did he dye his hair? Who were his friends? Did they traffic in truth together? He raised so much money for young people to go to the International Youth Conference on Globalization and Liberalism in Havana with the Los Angeles Coalition in solidarity with the people of Cuba. That was in 1999. The following year, he yelled down the Figueroa corridor when the DNC decided to rear its head in the City of Angels. And then he died in 2009. Was he sick? Was he in the hospital? Did he die alone? Don't we all die alone? Do the good ones die alone? Does this happen to the indispensable ones? Don't we all die alone in coalition with the people of El Salvador? He was at the organizing convening in 1980 that founded the coalition in solidarity with the people of El Salvador. He was the face that led the coalition in solidarity with the people of El Salvador. He retired and he was white, he was enthusiastic, and he was elfin, an effeminate man who implored his kin to get involved. He was who he was, and he was emblematic of the ones that go kamikaze hard in their actions of solidarity. These were the good ones. He had to have been a communist. He was a school teacher. All school teachers are communists, and that is still the coolest thing you can be. That's why capitalism dismisses the school teachers, because that's who seed the revolution. How do I take my loneliness and put it into the movement? How do I use my loneliness for good? How do I become remembered when the Bertolt Brecht adage of the good ones who struggled every day? How do I become indispensable? In every movement, people fuck. A love hangover never slowed down anybody. And besides, every revolution is fueled by a desire to live and to risk. It all means no day is taken as given. Every movement has its romantic dramas and entanglements until a revolutionary, a critical witness, is spirited away in a van riding along on the street in Pico Union, picking people off como zancudos en la luz, like a mistake on a test. Be indispensable. Take your loneliness and put it into a movement. Never feel alone forever. Always be in compañerismo. Is that the secret to love? Where do you go when you don't fit in anywhere else, and when anywhere else has no sense of justice for the world's most vulnerable, most subjugated by the forces of sociopathic capitalist imperialism? Who wants to fit into these places anyway? Where do you go when you don't want to let your actions be harnessed into the machines of productivity? He was good because he fought every day, and every day he fought, it was the fighting that made him good.
Thank you, Raquel and Javier, for such wonderful readings of your work. I'm honored to be in this conversation with the two of you, and that I'm able to begin the conversation and ask you a few questions. Before I begin, I would like to invite the audience to submit their questions as well. As we begin the conversation, we will be keeping track of your questions, and we'll make sure to get to those after our questions. So just to begin, I noticed that both of you reference very well-known recording artists and their songs. Raquel, in your case, Silvio Rodriguez and that very famous song, Baile con Serpientes, Javier, Quinito Mendez, and that very catchy rhythm that we all recognize. And so I have two questions, one for you, Raquel, and one for you, Javier, but both related to this inclusion of rhythm in your poetry. So one of the things that that is so interesting about this poem for Don White, Raquel, is how you integrate the Bertolt Brecht quote into your very poem, and you played it for us at the beginning, read it for us, and how you integrate also this idea of an indispensable man, imprescindible in español, but indispensable, and the importance of that in a social movement. Obviously for Don White, who was part of the Solidarity movement in LA back in the 80s and 90s, but now we're again facing a new movement. And so I want you to talk a little bit about that notion of indispensability that that you bring up in the poem and that you extrapolate from the Bertolt Brecht quote. And before I let you talk, I also want to ask Javier if you can talk a little bit about the relationship between form and content in your poem, There's a Wall, especially because the song, the merengue that you reference is such a ludic, playful song, and yet the subject that you're addressing is such a tragic one. And so if you could talk about how to reconcile both of those things, content and form.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that question, Yansi. I believe, though, that the pronunciation of Bertolt Brecht is Brecht, according to Silvio Rodriguez, which I love. And every time I'm in that space with other, artists like Elia Arce and Ruben Martinez, that's always just we're always tickled by just that interesting pronunciatory misfiring that feels just like home, right? I'm a generation after that, those who, listened to those records and had those moments. I was a child during the Ronald Reagan era. And so but I was this next generation and firmly at the feet, listening to those stories of not just battle stories in El Salvador, but the ways in which that had crossed into, Pico Union, MacArthur Park, the neighborhoods in which all of those, the partner organizations which began as refugee organizations, right? Refugee resource projects, the ways in which those areas of Los Angeles, get ignited and reignited in those histories. So in terms of like the indispensability, and to be indispensable, it's a really hard question for me to answer right now, but I think like in invoking and re-invoking the actors, the players, the participants, the agents, right, of social change, agents of revolutionary change, to invoke the memory of their actions, is in some ways, I think, like calling in the spirit of indispensability. And those, and if they did it every day, they were the best ones, right?
Thank you.
And for me, how to reconcile form and content. I think the biggest thing I learned from, like, I never expected to have a book out, and I never expected while I was writing the poem that are very personal poems, and I never expected an audience. And what I found out reading very traumatic content that gets to me is very tough. And so for this next book of poems that I'm not rushing in any way, I'm trying to explore what it would look like to take myself out of most poems. And I think all of the poems that I read today, I'm part of the first one, but not really. It's about another kid and exploring that, which I didn't really do completely, and also see what could happen if I talk about, if I don't just talk about trauma. And I think the poet that really made that evident for me and a friend, Yosimar Reyes, one of the first undocumented poets that I ever witnessed. And we would read together and he was like, why is your shit so sad? And that really stuck to me. And now I think to get out of the sadness, I'm mixing poem. I didn't read, I have another one, another cover. I'm calling them covers of like songs that everybody knows. So I have a cover of Drake as well. So and they're both about immigration, because an immigrant body doesn't only experience trauma, but we experience joy. And for me, I love dancing. And so I'm just trying to do and see what happens.
Wonderful. Thank you both. If I can ask you at least one other question, como salvadoreños todos, I noticed that in both of your readings, you reference Roque Dalton, who, for those that don't know in the audience, is probably one of the most well-known Salvadoran poets. And so I wanted to ask both of you the importance of that figure. Raquel, you address him directly in your poem, and Javier, you do so indirectly. That last poem that you read reminds me a lot of the Poema de Amor, which I also read as a very ironic vision of nationalism, because it's often read and understood as very nationalistic, but in fact, I think that Dalton is having, presenting a much more complicated vision of what it means to be Salvadoran. And so if you could both address the importance of that figure, that poet that is so central in the Salvadoran tradition, and also in the revolutionary tradition, because he was Salvadoran, but he lived in Cuba during the most important first decade of the Cuban Revolution. And so I would greatly appreciate that.
Sure, yes, Roque Dalton is he's the gateway drug, I think, into poetry. He was for me, and also just an avatar of irreverence, right? And that it's and this really strange ubiquity, in the sense that he was in the short life, is very well traveled, right? And there was a moment, and the thing that comes to me to bring Javier in was when Javier read poems in Tucson a few years ago, and I introduced him, and I was looking for a Roque Dalton poem to, kind of call into the space as a oral ancestral blessing. And there was a poem in Testimonios where the Sonoran Desert featured prominently, and I was kind of like, what? How is Roque Dalton showing up in here in this desert, the desert that surrounds Tucson? And I think that speaks to sort of this not it's magical, but it's also it's some sort of bibliomancy type relationship, that it's just like when I need to just something to get something very specific, and Roque Dalton is involved, I'm just like, oh my God, you're here.
Thank you.
So Roque Dalton and nationalism. Like Raquel was saying, Roque is a gateway drug. For me, as a 17-year-old. I didn't start writing until I was 17, 18. And just to realize that there was a Salvadoran poet out there in such a small country, because we're only like, what, 8 million now? Like we were 5 million, now we're 8 million. It's like, I compare it to realizing that Uruguay has won 2 World Cups with only 2 million people. So it's like that. It seems unbelievable, and that people know him internationally. But also, he's such a hero that's so problematic, and problematic in his writings, and that also, in a weird way, makes him human. And as nationalism is also problematic. And he's one of those figures that you can easily take down, but also you can easily learn a lot from. And so, yeah, I don't know. And I think that's the point of the poet, right? And he's the one who's really even called out all the quote unquote bourgeois revolutionaries of the time, like Neruda. And so just to have that, to like call people out, and he had a vision and he enacted it, and sadly he paid his life for it, but just that love of whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you both. And just to begin to wrap up my my questions, to give the audience the opportunity to ask some questions. Both of you, for both of you, this project is a very personal one, as well as a morally and ethically derived position, being involved in plain sight, being involved with the movement. Could you tell us more about your contribution to the project, and in particular, the phrases that you both selected, Nos vemos libres and Arriba el ánimo, and related to this, could you talk about the importance of this work with your poetics and with your activism?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, of course. Yeah, participating in plain sight, it was really powerful. Just the scope, the reach, and the very, very public and risky interventions in doing that in airspace over these detention centers, and calling attention to that they're very much part of a built environment, and that is easy to overlook or ignore in our day-to-days, right? I think what's been even more powerful is that it's happening during the pandemic, right? During the mandates of the pandemic that have forced us to slow down, and to force us to slow down in the sense that unless you're an essential worker, deemed an essential worker, right, you are mostly, not participating in the usual productivity machine. So to see the government scramble in trying to maintain the velocity of consumption, the velocity of productivity in the name of just like capitalist interests, and to then pull back even more, and to see that the detention center as a system, as another system of industry for this insatiable capitalist greed. And to really, I think the phrasing, it just came to me, it's really hard, it's 15 characters, and to try to say something meaningful, and say something poetic, and say something short that's going to land in the intended sightlines, right? Nos vemos libres, we see ourselves free, but also playing with the idea of like, we'll see you later, nos vemos, right? And in that time, in that like distance of like, I'm going to see you soon, I'm going to see you again, and when I see you, I'm going to see you, we're going to be free, you're going to be free. And these are certain a utopian longing, right, tempered by the like devastating reality. and being in Phoenix and seeing Phoenix, the detention center, the field office that I was paired with, just there in the middle of this like thriving, bustling downtown Phoenix, Main Street corridor near the university. All of it just is just a searing, and and then to know, like it's primarily Central American, Salvadoran, Honduran, Guatemalteco, and Haitian people are behind, these detention centers being disappeared and taken from their families. So, it's a powerful endeavor with, I hope, far-reaching, that we continue, right? That we maintain this, like, the indispensability, right, of participation. That's my elliptical thought.
Again, like moving from, I love the idea of Casos and Rafa had to do this action, just to write in the sky. That's fucking dope. And I just remember seeing that in a book with Raul Zurita. He wrote in the sky, and I thought that was fucking sick. So when they like sent me an email, I was like, fuck yeah. But what is said to me, and I think it goes back to the form and content, it's very hard for me to be out in the front lines because it's emotionally draining for me to do the work. I had planned to go out, and like COVID almost became an excuse for me not to be out there, and I wanted to, and this is still doing something. And then I just brought it back to the place of what pushes me forward, which is that trauma. When I was crossing the border, trying to cross the Sonoran Desert, looking up at the sky is this place of possibility, is the place of dreaming, it's almost like what is in front of you is no longer the United States, but it becomes what is on top, whatever American dream, quote unquote. And so I remember that, like, you dream overhead. So my phrase is arriba el ánimo. And kind of like Raquel, like a double entendre, like let's increase el ánimo. And yeah, I just pictured, I've had family members too who have been inside, and it is important that it was in Spanish. So people mostly on both sides, but mostly there's a thunder, but mostly people on the Spanish speaking side could understand it. So that's it.
Well, thank you so much to both of you again for such wonderful readings. I think I need to now turn it over to Kyle again.
Thank you both so much. That was amazing. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. We'll start with this one. How does engaging memory, reading it, sharing it, being in it feel? As creatives who to me exist in time as time travelers, here now, in the past, in the future too, how do you move through memory in such a generative way?
I guess I'll go. Moving through memory in a generative way. The thing about the writing, and poetry and the sort of the genre promiscuous nature of poetry and lyric and essay is doing the memory, and sometimes I don't want to share the whole memory. Sometimes I need to obscure the memory, finding ways to try and err, I guess, on memory. Moving through memory. I don't know. I hope that suffices. Javier.
Moving. It's hard. Now is especially hard because I've kind of put poetry in the back burner. It's not like I'm not writing anymore, but I'm trying to write a memoir. It comes from fucking memory. And trying to do that during a pandemic is very hard. And how to tap into it. Again, I'm using a lot of documentaries, which also re-traumatizes, because I'm trying to write about the 2 months that took me to come here and cross the border, etc. And so trying to tap into it, into these traumatic memories, takes a huge toll. And so during a pandemic, before the pandemic, I would leave my house and go write or try to write in an open space, because I thought that would prohibit me from like having a public breakdown. And now being inside, I have to be good about, I don't know, meditating, counseling, therapy, exercising. So it's an emotional toll. I don't know. Hope that suffices.
Yes, we had another question about that too. Catherine asked for Javier, when you have written directly about your immigration journey in your poetry, what is the process like to remember these painful memories while also taking care of yourself? What are your practices of care when you write about this?
So writing the first book of poems, I did that problematic and very Latino stereotypical thing where like, oh, if I'm doing the minimal work, I'm gonna be okay without therapy. So writing unaccompanied, I did not have any form of therapy. And that took its toll in my private life. Since then, I feel like I have to do that in order to learn how, and this is like an everlasting project on the side, and remembering that therapy or writing is not therapy, but you also need a professional to be talking to you and to get these practices. So now I do therapy every week. I try to exercise. I try to not force productivity and to feel good about not writing for like a week or 2 weeks and just let it come, especially now, which is hard because then you think about money and you like trying not to think about money, success. So it's like an ever growing process. I'm still trying to deal with it. So we'll see where that goes.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay. Felipe asked, as a visual maker, when language isn't there or fails me, I resort to the making to process the questions and concerns and resort imagination as a tool for liberation to transcend circumstances. I'm interested to hear the role of imagination in both of your creative processes. Raquel, would you like to take a stab?
Yes, I was just rereading the question. Imagination. I mean, that's where it all springs from, right? That's the wellspring, and so I feel I need to reread the question again. Yeah, I mean, I also feel like I too work in image and try to find ways to trap the image, right, in the space of my mind, and or if there is some sort of ekphrastic possibility of an artwork, I've been thinking a lot through the Humane Borders water station photographies that Delilah Montoya has in a 2004 collection called Trail of Thirst, Trail of Thirst. And it's it's a photograph right on the Babacavari mountain range, the part of the Tohono O'odham territory bisected by the U.S. and Mexico settlements, right? So and thinking in that it's just 3 water barrels and a dirt barely paved road, and all of the implications read into this piece and an image that's so haunting, what's the language that I'm able to, for lack of a better word, but very much in tune to the history of Southern Arizona, extract, right, from these images. And so I think my work's just all is and I'm an arts writer, and feeling like the critical review has kind of presented many limitations for me, but also feeling like it's opened doors into creating poetic language, imagining these lyrical meditations through artwork.
Imagination. I don't think I'm that imaginative. So, because I don't know, what I use, like I mentioned, the Netflix documentary, with my first book, I stole a lot of images, whether they be literal images from photographs about the war, or like images in documentaries about the war, about immigration, or written images of other people that I just changed. So it's a lot of emulation, and that's how my creativity gets inspired. And I'm still doing that to this day. Or like I listen to a song. So it's not, I don't know. I think it's everything. And if you start from a blank place where you think that you're not creative, you copy other people or like emulate other people, and that will give you something.
Or that's a conversation too.
Yeah, or it's borrowing somebody. Yeah.
So I think we've reached the end of our time, and I wanted to ask you both as a closing question, and what are some upcoming projects for you?
Upcoming projects. What are some upcoming projects? I just have two pieces coming out. I have a big piece for Places Journal on how Latinos impact the built environment in the age of COVID. Again, thinking about proximity and what proximity might look like now and then, the future of being together again. And then I have a cute little essay about Corral's guillotine, and thinking through artwork of the Borderlands for Poetry Foundation. And then just figuring out how to teach 3 classes across, a semester, a quarter, and visiting MFA residency.
Yes. Javier?
Upcoming projects, I'm trying to complete this memoir, and I am currently trying to move to Tucson in order to complete it, because those are the chapters that are left. And I hope that, again, tapping into the imagination, I hope that the physical place of where I crossed would tap into that memory. So we'll see if it works. And before we say bye, I want to thank Raquel and Yansi, and I want to know what Yansi's working on too. And thank you everybody at MOCA for having me. That's it.
Thank you to both of you. And as Kyle said, I'm still working on my project about the Central American diaspora in Los Angeles. So that's a work in progress. It's hard when you can't travel though. And the plan was to be in LA at least for part of the summer, and then I haven't been able to. But hopefully in the next few months, I'll be able to do some of that. And of course, teaching, which starts really soon.
Thank you all so much for sharing your talents with us tonight, and Yansi for moderating. For those of you at home who would like to learn more about In Plain Sight, or how you can get involved in the movement to abolish ICE and immigrant detention, XMAP.us. And we're plugging 2 calls for action that have been prioritized by our partners, which are a contribution to the National Bail Bonds funds, which should appear in your chat box right now, as well as the part of the Free the Mall campaign. We're appealing to Gavin Newsom to stop ICE transfers, specifically that of Patty Waller, who is a domestic violence survivor from Belize, who was sentenced to 20 years and is up for parole this Monday, August 31st. And she needs your support. So please do follow the links in the chat box and on our site, and appeal to Newsom to stop her transfer. Thank you all so much. And thank you to MOCA for sponsoring this program. We appreciate it. Good night.